1979. A British man sits in a pub with his mates. They've had 4 pints each, maybe 5. It's Friday night, the pub's closing. One of them says, "Right, who's driving?" The man jangles his keys. "I'm fine. I've only had a few." His friends laugh. "Go on then, we trust you." They pile into his car. He starts the engine, drives home, weaving slightly. But he makes it. No police. No accident. No consequences. This happened thousands of times every weekend in Britain during the 1970s and 80s. And British alcohol companies knew it. They didn't discourage it. They encouraged it. Not explicitly, they were too clever for that. But through their advertising, they normalized the idea that drinking and driving were socially acceptable, even expected. Pub scenes led directly to driving scenes. "One for the road" became a catchphrase, and British roads became killing fields. This is the story of 10 British alcohol ads that basically encouraged drink driving, and the thousands of deaths that followed. Let's start with the "one for the road" culture. This phrase, "one for the road," was everywhere in British alcohol ads during the 70s. It meant having one last drink before driving home. And the ads made it seem responsible. Sensible, even. One ad for John Smith's Bitter from 1976 showed a group of men in a pub. Last orders are called. One man says, "Just one more for the road." He drinks. Then the next shot shows him getting into his car, smiling. The voiceover says, "John Smith's, for the journey home." Another ad for Watney's Red Barrel featured a man finishing his pint, then jingling his car keys. The tagline, "Watney's," goes down smooth. The implication was clear. Drinking before driving wasn't dangerous. It was tradition. It was British. And millions of British drivers believed it. In 1980, over 30% of fatal car accidents in Britain involved alcohol. That's 1 in 3 deaths. And the ads kept saying, "one for the road." Then there were the pub-to-car transitions. Many British beer ads in the 70s and 80s showed a direct visual link between the pub and the car. No walking, no taxi, no gap. Just drink, then drive. One ad for Courage. Best from 1978 showed a man leaving a pub, pint glass empty on the table. The next shot, him opening his car door. The voiceover said, "Courage, for the journey ahead." Another ad for Double Diamond featured a man drinking at a bar, then cutting immediately to him driving at night, headlights cutting through darkness. The tagline, "A Double Diamond works wonders." These ads didn't just normalize drink driving. They made it look seamless, natural, expected. There was no mention of taxis, no suggestion of a designated driver. Just drink at the pub, drive home. And British audiences absorbed that message. One 1981 survey found that 42% of British men thought it was acceptable to drive after 3 pints. The ads taught them that. Let's talk about the masculinity messaging. British alcohol ads in the 70s didn't just sell beer, they sold identity. And part of that identity was risk-taking. Being able to handle your drink and still drive was framed as masculine. Strong, confident. One ad for Carlsberg from 1977 showed a man drinking several pints, then driving a sports car at high speed. The voiceover said, "Carlsberg, probably the best lager in the world, for men who know their limits." The implication? Real men know when they've had too much. Real men can handle it. But alcohol impairs judgment. That's the entire problem. You can't accurately assess your own impairment. But the ads framed drink driving as a skill, a test of manhood. Another ad for Whitbread Trophy featured a group of men challenging each other. "Bet you can't drive home after 6 pints." One man accepts. He drives. He wins. The ad made it look like a game. It wasn't. It was lethal. Now, the real ale country pub romanticization. In the late 70s and 80s, British alcohol companies heavily marketed the idea of the country pub. Stone walls, roaring fires, real ale. And these pubs were always in rural areas, places with no public transport. The ads showed people driving to these pubs, drinking, then driving home. One ad for Green King IPA from 1981 featured a couple driving through the countryside, arriving at a picturesque pub, drinking several pints, then driving home under the stars. The voiceover said, "Green King. Worth the drive." Another ad for Theakston's Old Peculiar showed a man taking a weekend drive to a remote pub, drinking heavily, then driving back. The tagline, "Theakston's, a journey worth taking. These ads explicitly encourage people to drive to pubs, and because these were rural pubs, there were no taxis, no buses. The only way home was to drive. The ads knew that, and they sold it anyway. Let's talk about the "it's just beer" minimization. British lager and beer ads in the 80s often downplayed alcohol content. They made beer seem harmless, light, refreshing, not real alcohol. One ad for Heineken from 1984 showed a man drinking several pints, then getting into his car. A friend says, "Mate, are you all right to drive?" He replies, "It's only lager." The ad played it as a joke. The implication, lager isn't strong. It's not like spirits. You can drive after lager. But a pint of lager contains the same alcohol as a shot of whiskey. The delivery method doesn't change the impairment. Yet the ads created this false distinction. Another ad for Carling Black Label featured the tagline, "I bet he drinks Carling Black Label." One scenario showed a man impressively driving home after a few. The ad celebrated it, made it aspirational. And British drinkers internalized the message. Beer doesn't count. You can drive after beer. Then there were the after-work drinking rituals. Many British alcohol ads in the 80s targeted office workers. The scenario was always the same. Stressful day at work, head to the pub, unwind with colleagues, then drive home. One ad for Stella Artois from 1987 showed businessmen in suits, ties loosened, drinking pints after work. The next shot, one of them unlocking his car in a dark car park. The voiceover said, "Stella Artois, reassuringly expensive." The implication, you've earned this. You've worked hard. You deserve to relax. And then naturally you drive home. Another ad for Foster's featured the same structure. Office stress, pub relief, car keys. The tagline, "Foster's Australian for beer." These ads didn't question the drive home. They made it part of the ritual. Work, drink, drive, repeat. And millions of British workers did exactly that. In 1985, over a half of drink-driving arrests in Britain occurred between 5 and 8 p.m., the post-work window. The ads had created a cultural norm. Now the lack of consequences in the narratives. This is crucial. Not a single British alcohol ad from the 70s or 80s showed the consequences of drink driving. No crashes, no police, no injuries, no guilt. Every ad showed people drinking, then driving, then arriving home safely. Smiling, happy, successful. One ad for Guinness from 1980 showed a man drinking 4 pints, then driving through Dublin at night, arriving home to his family. The tagline, "Guinness is good for you." Another ad for Tennent's Lager featured a man driving home after a heavy session, parking perfectly, walking into his house. The voiceover said, "Tennent's, it's a beautiful thing." These ads created a fantasy. They erased reality. In reality, drink driving in Britain during the 80s killed over 1,000 people per year, injured tens of thousands. But the ads never showed that. They showed only success, and British drinkers thought, it'll be fine. It always is. Let's talk about the legal alcohol limit deception. In 1967, Britain introduced a legal blood alcohol limit for driving, 80 milligrams per 100 milliliters of blood. That's roughly 3 pints for an average man. And alcohol companies use that limit in their advertising. Not to discourage drinking, but to suggest 3 pints was safe. One ad for Bass Pale Ale from 1973 featured a man drinking exactly 3 pints, then confidently getting into his car. The voiceover said, "Bass, know your limits." The implication, 3 pints is fine, you're legal. But the legal limit doesn't mean you're safe. Alcohol impairs reaction time, judgment, and coordination well below the legal limit. Studies show impairment begins at just 1 drink. But the ads framed the legal limit as a target, a safe zone, and British drivers aim for it. One 1989 study found that 61% of British drivers believed they could safely drive after 3 pints. The ads had taught them that. They were wrong. Then there's the sponsorship saturation. By the 1980s, British alcohol companies were sponsoring everything: football matches, rugby tournaments, cricket games, darts championships. And after every event, fans drove home, often after drinking at the event. The sponsors knew this. One ad for Carling, which sponsored the Premier League, showed fans drinking at a stadium, then cutting to car parks full of vehicles. The tagline, Carling, official beer of football. Another ad for Tetley's, which sponsored rugby, featured post-match pub scenes, followed by fans heading to their cars. The message was clear. Sport beer and driving were all part of the same cultural experience, and the alcohol companies made billions. In 1990, British alcohol sponsorship of sports was worth over £200 million, and British drink driving deaths remained above 1,000 per year. Here's the part that should make you furious. The alcohol companies knew. Internal documents released through lawsuits and Freedom of Information requests show that British breweries in the 80s were aware of the drink driving epidemic. They had research showing their ads contributed to it. One leaked memo from Allied Breweries in 1983 explicitly stated, "Our core demographic, working men aged 25 to 45, are also the highest risk group for drink driving offenses. We must be careful not to explicitly encourage this, but we can continue to normalize post-drinking car use." They knew, and they kept advertising. They paid lobbying groups to fight stricter drink driving laws. They funded studies that downplayed alcohol impairment. They fought against lower legal limits. And all the while, British drivers kept drinking and driving, kept crashing, kept dying. Between 1970 and 1990, over 25,000 people in Britain were killed in drink driving accidents. 25,000 funerals. 25,000 families destroyed. And the alcohol companies, they made record profits. Today, British drink driving laws are among the strictest in Europe. The legal limit in Scotland is lower than England. Random breath testing is common. Public awareness campaigns are everywhere. Don't drink and drive is drilled into every new driver. But it took decades to get here. It took grassroots campaigns by bereaved families. It took government intervention. It took public outrage. The alcohol companies didn't lead that change. They resisted it. And these ads, the ones that showed men drinking and driving, the ones that normalized one for the road, the ones that made impaired driving look masculine and confident, they're evidence of an industry that prioritized profit over human life, that sold beer by selling danger, and got away with it for far too long. These ads didn't just age poorly, they killed people, and we can never let that happen again.